Member Giles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I want to begin by acknowledging the Chair of the Select Committee, Chester Borrows, for the diligent chairing that he undertook during the exercise that he's just described, and to pay tribute to all the members of the Select Committee who heard submissions on the bill. I think the first thing that I would want to say is that this is a better bill than the legislation that we've got at the present time, and that is down to the hard work of the officials who I see in the Speaker's gallery. I want to acknowledge their input into making the legislation better than what we've got on the statute books at the moment, and to each of the members of the Select Committee for the work that they did in looking at the provisions of the bill and trying to work out how to make the law better. That is the best exercise that any parliamentarian can involve themselves in this place. And there are a number of really important recommendations from the Law Commission's report that are incorporated in the bill, and they're incorporated well. There's much harsher regulation over the irresponsible promotion of alcohol, and that has been a long time coming. It's good to see it in the legislation. There's a regulation making power provided to ban dangerous alcohol products and to restrict the alcoholic content of ready-to-drink beverages. And there are better and new enforcement provisions around alcohol offences, and there are tougher penalties for those who breach them. So that is progress. It is for that reason that members on this side of the House, in response to answers that were given at the Select Committee by submitters, we said to submitters, look, this isn't a bill that goes as far as we would like, but is it enough of an improvement on the status quo for you to want us to support it? Unanimously, the community group said yes, this is better than what there is at the moment. Please do support it as far as it goes. And so in the second reading debate, Mr Speaker, Labor members are going to vote to read the bill a second time. But, Sir, I mentioned that the officials are in the Speaker's gallery, and that's an unusual thing, as members will know. Normally we have officials in the well of the House ready to assist us on the committee stage. And there's going to be no committee stage for this bill in this Parliament because there isn't time to progress the legislation through that stage. So we aren't going to be able to scrutinise it fully. All the expectations that were raised amongst submitters, nearly 10,000 of them came and expressed their views to the Select Committee and had their hopes raised that this much better bill would actually become law prior to the election. Those hopes are dashed because there isn't going to be the time, and we're not going to have a detailed level of scrutiny in the House itself as to the provisions of the bill. That's a real shame. And the other real shame is one that's already been alluded to by my friend and colleague, the Labor spokesperson on this issue, Leanne Dalzell, and that is that we did what we do far too often in New Zealand at the moment. We, at least a previous government, sent this issue off to the Law Commission for an expert, dispassionate review of the law on this subject. The Law Commission was asked to hurry its review such that it didn't produce, as it normally does, a draft bill for the Parliament to consider. But nonetheless, the Commission came back with its recommendations, and they were comprehensive recommendations. They were good recommendations, and they were carefully thought out and backed up by the evidence. And, Sir, if we had done what we should do as a matter of course with Law Commission reports, and that is modelled legislation on the entirety of the report, brought it into the House, had it read a first time as per the Law Commission's recommendations, had a good old debate about what the Law Commission said we should do and why we should do it, then we might be in a different position. But as usual, the executive thought it knew better, and it rejected the idea of bringing forward a number of the Law Commission's reports into legislation. Many of them didn't make it as far as the bill. And so what we are looking at today in the House is a much truncated version of what the Law Commission asked us to do and said would be necessary to make a real change to our binge drinking culture. Now, Chester Borrows in his earlier contribution very properly recognised that we do have a problem with alcohol consumption in New Zealand. We do have a binge drinking culture. And he said, look, legislation won't be the only solution that you can apply to that sort of thing. And of course he's right. But it is a necessary, if not a sufficient thing to apply to this sort of problem. And if anybody needs evidence of this, they just need to think about the difference in New Zealand compared now to 25 years ago with issues like drink driving or issues like smoking in public places. The huge culture change that we have undergone in this country over questions like that hasn't all been because of the law, but changing the law was what kicked things off, which made, for example, with the smoking question, it's safe for people to say, no, I don't want you to be smoking next to me, thanks, or I don't want you smoking in my workplace. With the drink driving question, made it okay for people to say, hey, look, you've had too many drinks, how about you just cut it there, and if not, take a taxi home. The law plays an incredibly important part in these matters. And what we failed to do is make the law comprehensive, because the Law Commission said that we should have looked at three important areas at least, four important areas actually, where this bill fails to address any questions whatsoever. And so they are these. A lack of minimum pricing. Now, in its final report, the Law Commission said, we regard pricing policies as the central plank of any reform package aimed at reducing alcohol-related harm. It's very clear, sir, that inexpensive, readily available alcohol is one of the key drivers of alcohol harm, and yet there is no action on the table to deal with this issue. The international evidence is ambiguous. Price is one of the most effective ways to combat alcohol harm, just as we saw with the smoking issue. Price makes a difference. And if you don't deal with price, sir, then you fail, we fail as a parliament, to really address the sort of culture change that we all know we need in this area. So the second area where the Law Commission urged action was the availability of alcohol. We've had an experiment going on in New Zealand since we last had a comprehensive reform of alcohol law, where essentially we've had laissez-faire, basically very free availability of alcohol on very few conditions. And it hasn't worked because we've got this binge drinking culture in place. We needed to address the excessively free availability of alcohol in this country, and the bill doesn't do it. Thirdly, advertising and sponsorship. 94% of the submitters to the Select Committee wanted greater restrictions on advertising, and the bill just doesn't go there. 79% actually advocated a complete ban on alcohol sponsorship. And Labor agrees that those three steps, dealing with price, dealing with availability and dealing with advertising and sponsorship, would have made this so much better as legislation. I mentioned a fourth issue, sir. It's also the issue of the legal alcohol limit for driving. I'm not going to go into that in any detail, but it is a matter that this Parliament is just going to have to address if it wants to get serious about these questions. So, sir, I just want to conclude my remarks by saying, yes, it's better legislation. It's a shame it's not going to pass in this Parliament. But it's legislation that could be so much better if politicians didn't think that they knew better than the Law Commission, and if we didn't pay excessive heed to the interests of the industry, because failing to address those issues of availability, price, advertising and sponsorship mean that this bill is truly a lost opportunity for us to address the binge drinking culture that we see causing so much damage in the daily lives of so many New Zealanders.
I call the Honourable